and we will let you talk about cyber startups.
Thank you. Thanks for the intro. So I'm Vaughan, connecting in here from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and going to talk to you today about cyber startups. And I will try and suppress my urge to make dad jokes. Uh, I guess the story begins in 2017, late 2017. I took a chance and I quit my high-paying job working for a Silicon Valley-based company to start my own company. And this was as part of the CSIRO's Accelerator program. So what I'm going to do today is to share with you what I've learned on that journey. So just a second. All right. So start with a bit about me. Put simply, I'm a software engineer, computer science graduate from way back. I've been playing with Linux and Unix stuff since the 1990s, and really, there's really not a lot in my background that would suggest that I'd be someone who would start a company. And so hopefully this my career journey and where I've come from is inspiration to others that you can in fact learn how to learn some of these skills. And I'm quite happy to share what I do and how others can follow the same path. Now, while I was working at this Silicon Valley vendor, something that dawned on me is they're not really that different to us. And that's something I tell people all the time is we have the same talent here in Australia as they have over there in the Bay Area. We may not have quite the same concentration or numbers of people, but we do have that talent. And the main advantage they seem to have there is being in a time zone that's in a geography where there are in fact a lot of people that are willing to work with innovators, and also their optimistic attitude. I think there is an Aussie spirit of having a go, and I think we can apply that same spirit here, and more people could be startup founders. Now I'm a first-time founder. Sidearm is the first company I've started. And so I don't have all the answers. This is all very much a work in progress, even 5 years in. But I thought, given this is all fairly recent experience for me, it's only been a few years, and I'm still figuring out things. I can provide some insights rather that are relevant to other folks who are thinking about the same journey. All right, so let's start with some preliminaries. Well, first of all, I'll just say, these are all my opinions. So you'll hear different advice from other people, different approaches. That's fine, but this is just my own story, my own journey. So let's start with what is a startup? So anyone can be an entrepreneur. And my goal here is not to be picky about, this is a startup, that's not a startup. Anyone starting a business is an entrepreneur, and we need to celebrate that. And I think it is a great thing, people starting businesses and, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's a cafe or an ICT consulting business, it's cool. But what I want to do here is just to hone in on what do I mean by a startup? And I like to use this definition from Eric Ries, from the book, The Lean Startup. So it is a human institution. So it's a group of people coming together, usually under the form of a company. Often in Australia, it'd be a Pty Ltd. And you're coming together to create something, and it's going to be a new product or service. So we're creating something often from scratch. We're not a consultancy. We're not a distributor or a reseller. We're building something, and we're doing it under conditions of extreme uncertainty. Right? We're not reapplying a formula that's guaranteed to work. This is something that's going to be a leap into the unknown. And the approach I like to think of is not saying it's extreme uncertainty, but you've got to take the attitude that this might just work. This might work. And if it doesn't work, then we'll find something else that works. Okay, and why are cybersecurity startups important for Australia? One of the reasons that I'm talking about this topic today is because I want to encourage more people to have a go. And as a small p patriot, I strongly believe we need more cybersecurity startups in Australia. And a big part of this is the need for our self-determination going forward, sovereignty, in other words. And data sovereignty is very important. Who controls our data? If our data if the custodians of our data are large companies headquartered abroad, then do we really have sovereignty? So that, I think, is one pivotal consideration. Another one is jobs. Clearly, working at startups creates jobs, not just any job, but skilled jobs that pay well. And we can reverse the brain drain. I think some of the brightest minds of my generation, certainly, and I came through the Australian Signals Directorate and worked with some very talented people. Many of them are now working in Silicon Valley, or they're in Europe. How do we make opportunities so that those people can have a fulfilling career in Australia? And then there's innovation. So innovation is very specific to a given audience. So, if you want to innovate a product for Australian people, then it makes sense to do it in Australia, where you can get the direct feedback. So what we're doing is we're trying to make things better by making better things. And in the case of cybersecurity, that innovation can give our most important institutions an edge in defending themselves and protecting all of our data. And finally, one that gets touted a lot is exports. Just being able to bring money into the country and make Australia a more affluent and better place to live. So let's go on into how you launch a startup. So a lot of people ask, how to launch a startup. Do you have to be crazy? Is it insane? I would say no. It's actually a completely rational thing to do. And it all starts with having a problem you want to solve. And this is very important, to have a problem and to fall in love with the problem, not to fall in love with your solution. And a lot of people get this wrong, and they double down on a solution that doesn't actually solve a real problem. Secondly, you need to validate the problem by asking lots of questions. Talk to a lot of people and ask them questions. This is not about selling your solution. It's about finding out what the challenges that they're facing are. Now, it's got to be relevant to the style of problem you're trying to solve. It's not like a completely open question, but you need to ask those questions. And then finally, build a solution, maybe prototype it, and validate that solution as you go. So we're doing, it's this cycle, you read about it in the startup, in the Lean Startup and other books. Build, measure, learn. Build something, measure how it's received, how it performs, with your target market, and then learn from that. And then you go back and start building more. And the idea is you continue this build, measure, learn cycle until you get to what's called product market fit. And from there, you can go into scaling. So figuring out how to get your solution into the hands of as many people as possible. Okay, so that's a bit about startups in general. But how is cybersecurity startups different? So many startups out there solve problems that we all know about. Things like, say, 15-minute grocery delivery, ride sharing, different kind of financial, payment transactions and whatnot. What's really different about cybersecurity is the problems that we're solving are not widely known to the general public. They are niche problems, and they're very much really only known to specialists in large organizations, including, some of the people I know watching this feed. And large organizations, by virtue of how they operate, often have quite a long sales cycle. So you've got to think about that when you're doing a cybersecurity startup. Now, of course, if you come up with an idea that's consumer friendly and aimed at the mass market, then good luck. But I'm just saying a lot of these cybersecurity products are for the enterprise, and they're very subtle and complex and not well-known problems that you're solving. And then these problems also often present complex technical challenges, as I'm sure anyone who's spent any time in cyber can attest. So a little bit about the founder attitude. So what's the mindset that we need to bring to succeed as a startup founder? And first of all, you need to have a kind of optimism about the long term. I'd even go so far as saying you've got to be slightly naive, right? If you analyze all of the possible outcomes, most startups fail, to be honest. And really, if you're doing this as a way to create wealth for yourself, you're probably better off just getting a specialist skill, and finding a very high-paying job. But by being optimistic about the long term of your startup, that will keep you eyes on the horizon, focused on achieving your goal. You got to temper this long-term optimism with some short-term realism. And that means relentlessly focusing on what's right in front of you, making sure you're delivering high quality, making sure you're minimizing the risks, and also reducing wasted effort and staying very, very laser focused on doing the things that matter. You're going to need a lot of tenacity. You're going to have to be in this for the long haul. Most overnight success startups actually take 5, 10, even 20 years to build. And the other tip I would give is to be curious. If you're a curious person and you take an interest in things and ask good questions, you're setting yourself up for success. Okay, let's talk a bit about the commitment. How do you prepare for this commitment? And it can be a substantial commitment if you're going to devote several years of your life to a startup. So first of all, let's talk about what this commitment is. So you can found a startup tomorrow, in your spare time on a weekend, and create some kind of web app that does a thing, or an electronic device, even if that's your jam. And really, it's not a problem. It's not going to overcommit you to anything. But as you go through different steps, as you start hiring people, as you start selling product to people, as soon as you take money from investors, you are signing up to a higher level of commitment. Basically, once you're given more resources to work with, you take on more responsibility. And so what I'd suggest is you've got to have exit criteria. So you've got to say to yourself, if this doesn't work within, say, 3 months, I'm going to bail and try something different, right? There's no point going at something for the long term if it's not going to work. And so we're looking at the viability, the feasibility, the desirability of what it is you're building. And then some other considerations, just when you're preparing to go in, is how are you personally prepared for this? Running a startup does take a significant impact on every aspect of your life, or at least that's been my experience and the experience of many other founders I know. You might have seen on the About Me slide, I'm a former and aspiring endurance athlete. I don't do the same level of physical activities I used to. I probably don't look after myself as well as I used to. So it's going to have an impact. If you're starting from a fairly high level of physical health, that's going to set you up well for dealing with some compromises. Similarly, mental health. All right. So this is a obviously a sensitive topic, but just for a second, real talk. Everyone I know has some kind of mental health issues. Some people deal with it better than others. Some people have very minor issues, but we're all somewhere on that spectrum. Do you have a strategy for what you're going to do when things get tough? Who do you turn to? What are your coping mechanisms? Are you aware of your limits? And do you know what things are going to trigger you and throw you off balance? And I'll say right now, if you're a startup founder and you don't like hearing the word no, it's going to be a rough ride. So just be prepared. And then finally, your financial health. Your bank account is going to take a hammering when you found a startup. No one pays you to do your own thing. That's why it's often a good idea to start in your spare time if you can. And I understand not every employer will give you the freedom to do that. But yeah, make sure your finances are in pretty good shape. And again, know when your limits are. And going back to that previous point about exit criteria, know when it's time to fold them, right? And to walk away, as they say in The Gambler. All right, a bit about the founding team. So every startup, we've spoken a bit about the founder mindset already, but your founding team is a critical component. So who are you going to pick to be on the journey with you at the very beginning? Now, your business model is probably going to change. Whatever idea you've thought of, ideas are cheap. Ideas come and go. The execution of the idea, the desirability, the viability of the idea is going to be tested. And that test is going to fail very often. And when it fails, you need to be able to adapt. And so you need a founding team who can come on that journey with you, and they're able to change. So as you go through that build, measure, learn cycle, you want to be able to talk to your founding team and have a contest of ideas, not a battle of egos. So choose carefully. Ego is the enemy, right? If you're unable to play the ball, if you have to play the player, you're in for a rough time. There's going to be a lot of unhappy people. Investors understand this really well. Investors, certainly at the early stage, are more interested in who the founding team is, and the founders particularly, than they are in your idea. Like I said, ideas are cheap. They come and go. Anyone can have an idea. Are we working with a founding team that can adapt when they find out that they're, when someone tells them their baby is ugly, basically? So look for people who are T-shaped, right? So someone who is a Jack or Jill of all trades, but a specialist in one. The classic formula, and I'll just put this out there, is you want to find a hustler, a hacker, and a hipster. Now, they could all be the same person. It could be two people. But ideally, you want to have complementary skill sets. You can found a startup on your own. You can found it with a team of two. I think actually, I have a co-founder, Ben Waters. Hello, Ben, if you're listening. And I think actually the perfect number of founders is about 4. I've seen a lot of 4-person startups really do well. But I guess you take who you can get, and you do the best with what you have. In the early days, people have to be building or selling the product. That's really the only 2 jobs: building or selling. Are you doing product development or customer development? 2 sides of the business. The jobs to be done basically are product. So as I mentioned, product development, and then sales, which I'm including marketing under this definition, even though I now realize they're different things, having been on this journey. And then also sourcing the right talent and managing the financial aspects of the business. And finance includes raising equity. So in a way, you could say sales, talent, and finance are really all different kinds of sales, right? You're selling the product, you're selling a career to somebody, or you're selling actual chunks of the company to investors. And the final point I've got here is think about equity when you're thinking about your founding team. I'm a big proponent of rewarding people with equity, even if it's a small amount of the company, right? It gives people an incentive. It means your incentives are aligned. And if you look back to the very first companies that were ever formed, these were companies that were built for trading, and they were based around this idea of getting on a wooden ship and sailing around the world and trading with people in some remote part of the world, and then coming back maybe even a year later and selling the goods back where you came from. And how do you get someone to sign up for a crazy journey in a wooden ship? And the answer is you give everybody equity, so everybody joins the ship's company. And this is where companies came from, and I think it's important to remember those roots. And this is how you motivate people and connect them and make sure that we're all in this together for the same reasons. All right, let's move on to startup economics. And I included this tweet here from someone on Twitter whose logic I don't completely agree with here. I think the only thing that's clear from this is the author clearly has never grown tomatoes. I've got a garden bed with some tomatoes. They all died. I can assure you this is not a way to get rich. But all the same, we all know stonks only go up. And so let's talk about how this works in the concept of a startup. So first of all, now I did mention that my definition of a startup does not include services. Well, I should qualify that a bit. It can include services, but that's not really, that's not a scalable model. So services is where you're trading your time for revenue. And it's a great way to make money. It's a proven way to make money if you're delivering a valuable service. But it's different to what you would ideally do in what I define as a startup. So the difference with a startup is you've got a product, And so what this is, it's an IP asset. You've built some kind of asset, whether it be a hardware device or a web application, or maybe some content with a content delivery platform, but you are delivering value, and you're delivering value to a lot of people, and it scales. It means you can add more people to the platform without needing to trade more of your time. The downside of this is that building products, building assets is very capital intensive, right? So people want to pay to use your asset, but they don't want to pay you to build it. And usually they expect, if you're getting, say, bespoke software written, you can bill by the day. If people are using, a SaaS platform, they don't expect to pay anywhere near that much, right? They expect to pay a lot less. So it means you've got to put in a lot of upfront effort to build something that you can sell then to lots of people. And ideally, when you build this asset, it should be very efficient to sustain. Okay, ideally, you can distribute this platform to lots of people, and every additional customer that you bring on, I mean, of course, there will be some cost of additional customers. You need to support them. You need to deliver upgrades and answer their support queries, that sort of thing. But ideally, you have it so the product is so easy to use and so reliable that it's very efficient to sustain. And some of the numbers that we track as startup founders and startup investors, I guess, take a keen interest in this as well. ARR, you'll hear a lot, annual recurring revenue. That means as of right now, how many customers do you have on your platform and how much are they paying? And what does that imply about your annual revenue as of this instant? Monthly recurring revenue is another way to mention that. MRR, very common with SaaS platforms, especially those pay by the month credit card style platforms. CAC, cost of acquiring a customer. So if you're spending a whole lot on ads, and it's going to cost you so many dollars in ads to get a person on, then how long does it take for them to actually spend enough money on subscription to pay back the cost of bringing them onto the platform? And what does that tell you about the efficiency of your customer acquisition? Net burn, which is related to how fast are you burning through your capital, assuming that you're not making a profit. And that defines what your runway is. So how long can you keep the lights on until you either need to pivot and do a radical change in your unit economics, or you need to bring on more funding. Gross margin, I mentioned earlier that good products are efficient to sustain. Margin is really a measure of a measure of that efficiency. So once you've got a customer in steady state and they're using the platform and all going well, taking away the amount of money that you're probably still burning on continuing to build that asset, how efficient is your service delivery? Then you've got monthly active users and year-on-year growth as other things we might want to track. So it's good to be aware of these kind of metrics and to think about what they can tell you about the success of your business and also what they're signaling to any potential investors. So a very controversial question here. Do you bootstrap or do you take venture capital? So bootstrapping is where pretty much you run it like a traditional business. Okay, so you don't take any outside money. You start making revenue from day one, and you pay for all your expenses from your revenue, and you operate the business at a profit. Could be a very modest profit, but the idea is you stay wholly independent and you just build the business steadily. The other option is venture capital. So this is where you get external people who are not operationally involved in the business, people you probably don't even know, to pile in money. And this is largely how the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem works, is based on venture capital, with some notable exceptions. And special call out here to the founders, of Atlassian, who bootstrapped because basically no one was gonna invest in a couple of university graduates, and they've done amazing things by bootstrapping. Now they've taken venture funding later in their process, but it is entirely possible to build a global business bootstrapping. But you need to think about some considerations here as to why you make this decision. Firstly, what are your goals, right? Is this a business you want to hand down to your children, for example? If it is, probably not venture capital, okay? venture capitalists have time frames. They want to see a return on that investment. They either want to see it go public or they want to see your company sell to a larger company. Secondly, are you independently wealthy? I mean, I'm not, but it's a fair question to ask. If you have lots of cash from your previous life activities, or maybe you inherited some money, why not bootstrap? If you're willing to put your wealth on the line, then you can go ahead and do that. Obviously, not a choice for many of us, and venture capital starts to look more attractive if you're not someone with that amount of disposable wealth. Another approach is to use services cash flow, so taking money from services you're delivering to sustain the ongoing product development. This is a tricky model. I know some people that have got this right, but it's often very difficult. You will be under constant pressure if you're delivering services to basically to bill more, to basically invest in putting people forward, charging a day rate, getting cash inflow. It's very hard to take that hard-earned services money where you've traded your time and then to put it into development of a speculative product that may not even be useful to anybody. This I think works better when you've got a services business that's well aligned with the actual product you're building and may even be of use to the people who you're delivering the services to. The fourth one there, the speed you move at. This is increasingly an issue, especially in cybersecurity. There are companies abroad and looking mostly at USA, Israel, Western Europe, having vast amounts of capital thrown at them. No matter how good your idea is, no matter how awesome your team is, if you're bootstrapping, you may not be able to move fast enough to get the opportunity before you're outcompeted by these better funded entities abroad. So venture capital can help you move faster. And then finally, retention of control. So if you are well aligned with what investors want, then it's fine to give them some equity. And by doing that, you're always going to give up some control. No one's going to give you a huge pile of money and say, do what you want. I'm not allowed to take the venture money that I've raised and use it to start an organic sourdough bakery. I have to use it to build the sidearm company doing what we said we would do. And I'm totally fine with that. If you want to retain complete flexibility about the path you choose, then I'd advise not to take venture capital. Okay, how does it work? In Australia, we have the early stage venture capital limited partnership inscribed into law. What this means is that an ESVCLP company has certain tax benefits that are applied to the partners of the firm and also their investors. So they have investors too who are piling money in, people like super funds, that sort of thing. What this means is that there's a government incentive to invest in startups. You won't find many VCs who understand cybersecurity. Just like I mentioned, we're a very niche market. Finding VCs who understand this is also a very niche proposition. So just be aware that you're going to have to search a little harder. I spoke to one VC who said, mate, what you're doing sounds great. I have no idea what it is. And I'm more likely to invest in a SaaS platform for plumbers, right? Because I know there's a lot of plumbers and I understand what they do and it makes sense. People like that are not going to invest in you. You're going to need patient investors. Like I mentioned earlier, complex tech stack, long sales cycle. They're not going to get an overnight return. And when you're framing a proposition to investors, what you want to do is start with a goal. So how much funds do you want to raise? You don't want to raise as much as possible, but how much do you need? And then from there, how much of your company are you willing to give away? And how can you justify the valuation to allow you to sell your company, at that price? And that goes back to those metrics I mentioned. Little chart here just showing the different phases of VC-funded startups. I won't go into this in detail, but if anyone's interested, hit me up. Just talking here about the different parameters, I guess, around who invests and what style of investment they do at the different stages you're at. Just quickly on grants, be very careful taking grants. If it's something like the R&D tax incentive or export market development, that's fine. When you get grants that are tied to a specific project, you're effectively signing up to do a thing, and it's very hard to change your mind later about that. Also, writing grant applications is a massive hassle. I don't recommend it. Challenges and rewards. I'll roll through this pretty quickly. You can create your own organization, how you want to create it. The downside is you've got to create all of it. You can pick yourself. This is not a promotion. This is not an application for a job. You simply quit and pick yourself to run it. But then, of course, no one's going to pay you. And you know, if you put CEO on your business card, you're probably going to suffer from some imposter syndrome. I certainly do. You get to own all of your wins. That sounds good. But then you have to put up with lots of no responses from people as well. So you also own all of your failures. You can solve the problem that you are most passionate about, but you're going to be doing that in long hours and also on weekends. And the other thing I wanted to mention is, and this is a reward that keeps giving, it seems there's so many people that want to pay it forward and help you. You know, if you're in Australia and you're founding a startup, people always want to help you win. And you know, you can use your position to help other people too. You know, once you get underway and get some momentum going. A bit about ideas. I'm going to roll through this quickly. This quote really inspired me, so I'm going to leave it up on the screen. Find user experiences that could be better. Find risks that have been left untreated. And I know a lot of you there working in cyber are going to see problems like this that need solving. What are the products that are just crazy expensive and you think you could deliver it cheaper? Also, what's an opinion you have that a lot of people would disagree with? Now, you don't want to have every single person disagreeing with you, because then you'll have basically no customers at all. But if you've got a divisive opinion, very often a controversy like that has, you know, a problem to be solved embedded in it, or a solution that's not being thought of. And keep a list. And I'd say this even if you're not founding a startup, keep a list of ideas. And it's like priming a pump. The more you write down, the more ideas you'll find you have. It's a good way to spur creativity. Some parting thoughts. Do this because you want the experience. It's not about getting rich. Back yourself. And a point there that, you know, once you're extending yourself and learning new things, you're going to feel imposter syndrome. That's part of it. Be prepared. Have exit strategies for every eventuality. Use your community and network as much as you can. People really do want to get involved and help you. And consider joining an existing startup. You don't have to go it alone and run your own thing. Join a startup, learn what it's like, ask the founders questions. I'm happy to answer questions for my team. Find out what it's like and then decide if it's for you. And finally, here are some resources, some books that I really like, and a couple of websites there. Shout out to the Cyrise people who helped me get started. And Airtree there as well has some great resources, you know, based around how to do VC, or how to get funding from VCs as well. And that's all. I'm not sure if there were any questions.